Hello, ladies and gentlemen. What rapt and silent attention we will now have to earn it. Very warm welcome to all of you tonight. I'm Anne McElvoy, and it's my great pleasure to be chairing Matthew Taylor's annual RSA Chief Executives Lecture this evening. Just before we begin the usual housekeeping, which I'm sure you're all used to, but if you could switch your mobiles to proper silent, we would be very grateful. We'd like to hear from you later, but not so much from your phone. We're filming this evening's event and streaming live over the web, so welcome also to those of you joining us online from the world outside. If you would like to tweet about this, please do so. The hashtag is #PowerToCreate, one word. Well, it's a particularly significant annual lecture for Matthew here this year. Some of you will know that over recent months, the organisation has been developing some new thinking about its role and its central mission and the impact that it has in the world. And I think that Matthew's words tonight are going to invite us to consider that, both in the context of the RSA and more generally in the society around us. He will be presenting some of the first fruits of the process and revealing the ideas that underlie it and will guide the RSA's programme of work in the future. So I'm sure he'd very much like to hear your responses and thoughts to that. I've worked with Matthew a lot in many incarnations. Some of you might hear us squabbling on the moral maze on occasion. Get a week off this week for good behaviour by coming to do this. One of the things that I've always admired about Matthew, although we've often had points of difference, is that he really isn't afraid of taking on the big subjects and the big ideas and trying to apply them to the world we live in practical steps as well as big thoughts. And I think this is no exception. Looking at creativity at the moment seems to me to be an excellent choice, an under-discussed subject and an under-discussed approach. And I was just sort of leafing around in my ancient files on the subject today and found this quote from Goethe. "If you treat an individual as he is," he said, "he will remain how he is. If you treat him as if he were what he ought to be, he will become what he ought to be and what he could be." I think that's a very good guideline for this evening's discussions. We might hear something more along those lines for the 21st century as opposed to the end of the 18th. So please, without any further ado, do join me in welcoming Matthew Taylor.
Well, thank you, Anne, and thank you all for coming this evening. It's impossible to do a speech at this particular moment in the sporting calendar without being tempted with footballing metaphors. I thought, should I do a Brazilian speech? Exhilarating and heartwarming, but somehow failing to live up to expectations. A German speech, focused, impactful, but somehow strangely joyless. A Dutch speech, basically pretty dull until the surprise ending. An Argentinian speech, rather pedestrian and predictable, apart from the brilliant Messi bit. Thank you. But hopefully my speech won't be depressing, frustrating, and leaving you embarrassed that you even hoped it would be good. It won't be an England speech. Also, people might be slightly worried by the amount of paper in my hand as I walk to the lectern. This is because I have an answer to the riddle, what happens when failing eyesight meets unfailing vanity? The answer to that question is 36-point typeface. I may still have to revert to my glasses. The RSA has always been a progressive organisation. We've been around for 260 years, and as the world has changed many times over, so has our account of progress and the contribution that we might make to it. Tonight I'm speaking to the latest account, a new worldview and mission. We call it the power to create. My argument is that we are at the cusp of an unprecedented opportunity. Powerful social and technological change means that we can now realistically commit to the aspiration that every citizen should live a creative life. But this major step in human progress will not happen unless we're able to identify and to seek to remove the high barriers that currently stand in its way. So, what do I mean by a creative life? Creativity is a slippery concept. The first definition offered by Google is the use of imagination or new ideas to create something. Not only is this obviously circular, but it begs the question, what is the something that has to be created to count as creativity? For some people, it's a quality belonging to certain activities, art, culture, design. Indeed, the RSA argues strongly for the links between cultural flourishing and social and economic progress. In this very room this afternoon, an hour ago, we held the first RSA Academy's Arts Day. Arguably, it was a stronger testament to the power to create than anything that I'll be saying in the next 25 minutes. For others, the concept of creativity can be emptied of virtue, as in creative accounting, or the job title given to people who use their undoubted talents to dream up advertising slogans. But whilst we can't all make the contribution of artists or the income of advertising executives, there's one thing to which we can all aspire: to live creative lives, lives of which we are the author, lives which allow us to be the best people we can be. What does such an aspiration mean for our opportunities and responsibilities? How does it differ from the social democratic emphasis on equality or the liberal rights on freedom? Led by the work of my colleague Adam Lent, we have debated this fiercely amongst ourselves at the RSA, and if the power to create gains any traction, we would welcome a wider debate. But let me give you my version tonight to be going on with. The first aspect of the creative life is individual freedom. As liberals say, as long as we're not directly inhibiting others, we should be able to think our own thoughts, use our own words, and make our own decisions. But as Amartya Sen and others have argued, creative freedom also involves resources. We talk about how savings, or educational qualifications, or time give us the freedom to pursue our choices. And we use the third idea of freedom. This refers to our capabilities, our dispositions. We talk about people being free of drugs, free of mental illness, free from a narrow or fundamentalist worldview. Do we have the knowledge, attitude, temperament to be free? Freedom makes the creative life possible, but our choices determine whether we fulfill that possibility. It's not a state that can be achieved, but a continuous process of building a life which is unique and meaningful. Chinese artist Ai Weiwei says, "Creativity is the power to act." So, prizing creativity means honouring the individual, but we must never imagine that a creative life can be realised apart from our existence as social beings. As Richard Rorty has written, "We are only individuals in as much as we are social. None of us has a self to be faithful to except the one which has been cobbled together in interchanges with parents, siblings, friends, enemies, churches and governments. Our creations, a business, an artistic performance, a social movement, a product, a service, an idea, simply an act of generosity, are only possible because of the people around us. It's not just individuals that we describe as being more or less creative, but organisations, places, societies. We think of creativity being the fount of high culture, but culture, in the broader sense of the values, expectations and norms that pervade state, market and community, are critical determinants of a society's creative capacity. To see the creative life as a substantive virtue urges our commitment to a society in which this life is realistically attainable, not just for ourselves, but for our fellow citizens. And the power to create combines an idealistic view of human flourishing with democratic inclusiveness. As Roberto Ungar said last year on this stage, the true goal of progressives must be now, as it was in the 19th century, a larger life for the ordinary man and woman. Yet from Aristotle to the Victorians, philosophers and social commentators, with an ambitious, high-minded idea of the good life well lived, have also tended to be elitists, assuming that such an ideal was beyond the capabilities of the masses. But all human beings have the capacity to be the authors of their own lives. Meaning-making is what marks us out as a species. We are born with the muscles for creativity, muscles that grow with the exercise of self-determination. In short, the power to create asserts that all citizens can and should live creative lives. So this is our vision. Is there any reason to believe the power to create is anything other than a distant aspiration, a star to navigate by, but not yet a road to follow? We believe that there is. We believe we're reaching a tipping point at which the possibility of and the need for a creative citizenry looms before us and presents us with urgent choices. This moment of inflection is the result of a set of interconnected changes leading to a step change in both the demand for and supply of creativity in modern society. The first changes are around human capability and appetite. In all our breastbeating about the failings of our education system, we can forget just how much more educated today's citizens are. In less than 2 generations, we've gone from under 10% to almost half of young people experiencing higher education. We might lag behind other countries in some areas, but our young people are among the best in the world when it comes to problem solving. Despite the many pressures they face, today's young people are critiquing narrow materialism in arguably a more nuanced and concrete way than their grandparents attempted in the 60s. RSA research shows more young people than ever before wanting the autonomy of owning their own business, even though the returns and security are often lower than a traditional job. Among those opting for employment, a growing proportion say they make decisions influenced by the values and ethical practices of employers. And as consumers too, young people are at the forefront of an emerging sharing economy. More broadly, a set of intertwined factors including rising affluence, a decline in the importance of tradition and deference, exposure of modern citizens through travel, immigration and the media to different cultures are all leading to more people in the developed world aspiring to what the World Values Survey calls self-expression. Technology is the second great engine of change. In its wake, many barriers to creative expression and enterprise have come tumbling down. The Internet has led to a quantum leap in affordable, easy access to key tools of creativity, learning, communicating, trading, collaborating. Its pioneers thought the World Wide Web would be primarily a tool for the exchange of information amongst experts. But when the financial and other costs of generating and sharing content started to fall, a massive global appetite was revealed. In music, films, photographs, blogs, apps, social networks, hundreds of millions of people generating content, the overwhelming majority of it for free. As part of my ongoing midlife crisis, I'm teaching myself the guitar. For every time I try to master a tune, there are about 20 free tutorials on offer on YouTube. Following in the footsteps of pioneers like Wikipedia and Linux, again and again the creation of new, free or inexpensive, easy-to-use platforms have released waves of human creativity, entrepreneurial aspiration, collaborative endeavour. For example, new innovation platforms like Innocentive are inviting people to design and invent solutions to big challenges. Etsy has opened up the world's markets to craft workers. Kickstarter provides access to capital to innovators of every kind and is encouraging more people to become active, engaged investors in other people's creative ideas. Fast-growing platform Patreon enables people to invest in their favourite up-and-coming artists. Peer-to-peer and sharing economy platforms, whether social enterprises like FreeCycle and Streetbank or commercial like Airbnb, enable anyone to trade or exchange, blurring the boundaries between buyer and seller, profit-making and sharing. And human trust and reciprocity is as important as digital algorithms to the success of these platforms. Now, in our wonderment at the pace of innovation, we must resist technological determinism. The internet of invention and cultural self-expression is also the internet of porn, hate and trivia. Technology can and is sometimes used to reduce autonomy and dull creativity. Indeed, as technology becomes ever more central to our identities, we need to have a much more explicitly political debate about who controls it and for what purpose. Nevertheless, in aggregate, across a wide spectrum of human activity, greater creativity is being enabled and encouraged. The network economics are exponential. The demand for creativity drives supply, the supply of creativity drives demand, and new platforms drive both. And the impact has barely even begun. The first generation for whom it's been part of the fabric of their entire lives are now reaching adulthood. The social web, pervasive not just in terms of connectivity, but it's an intrinsic part of modern identity. It will change the town hall, Whitehall, schools, business, social enterprises, international relations in ways we cannot yet conceive, let alone adapt to. In short, the internet has the capacity to be the most powerful accelerator of creativity in human history. Also, the relationship between creativity on and offline is unpredictable but largely positive. The music industry feared downloading would obliterate its profits. Instead, it's transformed its business model. We consume much, much more music. I'm old enough to remember when you used to go into a particular room in the house to listen to music. Now people listen to music everywhere. There are probably people in this room already listening to music. People who used to just listen to music are now much more likely to spend their money being part of the experience at concerts and festivals. From computer-aided design to making technologies like 3D printing, new technologies making it easier and easier to turn ideas into material products. All around the world, people are using the net to seek out new routes to personal development, connection and self-expression. And it turns out that we need this appetite. The new demands we make on citizens represent the third trend that could take us to a creativity tipping point. Take the CBI's definition of employability. They say it's the ability to work in a team, a willingness to demonstrate initiative and original thought, self-discipline in starting and completing tasks. Various factors, including the accelerating pace of change in markets, the need for continuous innovation, the expectation of a more personalised service, the growing appetite for authenticity in products and services, all of these things increase the premium on the capacity of employees to be creative and self-motivated. And in the search for new insights and products, more companies are also acknowledging and encouraging consumer-led innovation. The rise of intelligent robots has led pessimistic and optimistic commentators to predict respectively either massive unemployment or a world of leisure. But as you will all know, such predictions have been made and confounded before. A more likely outcome is a further restructuring of labour markets and market values, with consumers and service users putting a greater premium on the creative, effective touches that only human engagement can bring. Let the robots do the robotic work, let humans flourish creatively. And increasingly, the government too wants creative citizens. The mid-20th century model of industrial production, Fordism as it's sometimes called, emphasised standardised forms of mass production delivered through large centralised organisation. The modern welfare state was built on largely the same principles. But as the weaknesses of that model emerged, as many social needs have grown or become more intractable, as economic crises have spawned waves of austerity, we've come to see that the model of a paternalistic state delivering uniform services to a passive, undifferentiated citizenry is neither progressive nor practical. Conservative local authorities might refer to the big society. Labour wants the idea of the cooperative council. But whatever the label, forward-thinking public agencies, and there are still too few, are reaching a radical conclusion. Their citizens and communities are not just bundles of need, they are also huge untapped assets. Using ethnography, public engagement, social network analysis, agencies are trying to understand those assets and how they can be mobilised. Methods of co-design and co-delivery are being pursued, blurring the boundary between professional and client. A whole set of initiatives, like home share and shared lives, are modern examples of an old ideal, reciprocal civic relationships, offering an alternative and adjunct to public services. Encouraged by the principle of payment by results, there's a massive growth in social enterprise. And the world of policy and service innovation, which used to be largely closed, is now opened by big data, with potentially anyone with the time and inclination able to spot trends, test hypotheses, develop solutions. Of course, huge challenges like caring for an ageing population, tackling inequality, and particularly responding to climate change require concerted action at national, local and international level. But our strategies will also require an adaptive and creative citizenry with the skills and confidence to develop its own solutions. So, a better educated, more self-expressive population, the impact of technology, the demand for new attributes in workers and citizens. These are all factors taking us towards a society in which we can hope to live what Unger called a larger life. But the potential tipping point might not be reached, because there is another side to this story, the barriers to a society of creative possibility. Let me describe a couple of those. Culture has a vital and independent significance, and this is the first barrier. In our culture, the idea that everyone can and should live creatively is not yet accepted as an aspiration, let alone a practical imperative. We can see this, for example, in the relatively low priority given to autonomy, engagement and motivation in assessing the value of education and employment. 43% of the workforce, 13 million people in the UK, report that they aren't using their potential and skills at work. It's not that we don't see living a creative life as a good thing, nor that anyone doesn't seem to want it for themselves. In a style reminiscent of resistance to earlier movements for improvements in universal rights or entitlements, the measures necessary to achieve greater autonomy and fulfilment for all are opposed on the implicit grounds that those at the top should be able to preserve their privileges, while the hoi polloi show no sign of wanting their lives of docile subservience to be disturbed by higher aspirations. A concrete symbol of our limited commitment to the ideal of creative lives for all is the persistence of educational privilege and intergenerational inequality, the past devouring the future, in Thomas Piketty's memorable phrase. The point is not inequality per se, but that key resources that foster creative aspirations and choices are not utilised to the maximum benefits of society as a whole. If we judge social progress by the scale of human creativity, extreme inequality is deeply inefficient. Take capital. Not only is it concentrated in a certain strata of the population, it's concentrated in assets like London house values that do little to expand people's creative possibilities. Study after study has shown that access to relatively small amounts of capital can have a much